Boyfriend weaponized gaslighting and blamed me for his violence and PRN addiction, insisting I am the Ab-sive one. I, 23F, have been with my boyfriend, 28 male, for 8 years. I know it's pretty much impossible to paint a good picture of someone through a few paragraphs of a story, especially considering I'm mostly pointing out problem areas, but please keep in mind that he's a good person. He's loving, gentle, cares about me than anything and absolutely devoted to me, but we have tangled this relationship into quite a mess. Like everyone who posts here, I have countless reasons to want to stay, but I'm having trouble taking off these rose-colored glasses. Please help me, Reddit. When we started dating I was going through a lot of shit, and he was the first guy I've ever been with. I was the one who was always compromising and always finding ways to go see him. He very rarely came to see me, and if he did he would get irritated and complain that he shouldn't have to. He would ask me to come over every single night, saying he missed me and he couldn't sleep. I lived about an hour away, and I didn't even have a car, so when I'd find rides to his house, bus, friends driving me, etc., I was excited to see him. I'd get there early in the day, and instead of seeing him, I'd sit on his couch alone for hours while he played video games. It was infuriating, because I played games too, but he always told me not to bring my console because I could use his. He had literally 0 games for it, but I always ended up just pacing around his house, waiting for him to give me a second of his time. As bad as this sounds, and it was, he was so sweet and sincere when he would finally get done. He told me how glad he was that he could keep up with his legion and still have a girlfriend. He said although he ended up breaking up with his last 3 because of fidelity problems, they hated him gaming. I was young and stupid, and caught up in being the cool girlfriend. I used to have a lot of fun, going to clubs and parties and all kinds of things. I had a ton of friends, mostly male. He would get upset if I talked to them, even the ones I had known since I was a toddler, and he said that since he didn't talk to girls then I shouldn't either. Little did I know, he actually was talking to a few girls all this time. He said I love you 2 days into dating, and proposed after a few months. I told him I wasn't ready, that I loved him but I was too young and I needed to get to know him better. He was different after this, like it hurt him for me to say no. After a few months together, I'd tell him I was about to do something, like walk to the grocery store since I had no car, and he would scream at me over the phone. He said I was an idiot, going to get myself killed. Women can't walk alone, especially near nighttime. I know what you're thinking, why would I stay with a sexist asshole? Well, he had never made it seem like he was sexist before, and would deny saying it. He would say he never said any such thing, and that he was only worried about me. I'd ask why he screamed, and tell him it wasn't okay to treat me like that, and he'd say I have never and will never yell at you. At this point I'm already doubting my sanity, but the other 75% or so of the time, he's so incredibly sweet to me. I moved in with him about 10 months in because my mother died, and I had nowhere else to go. I had a job, but didn't make enough to support myself. His family owned farmland in the south, and had bought him his own house. About a year into our relationship, I found out that he'd lied about every single thing he'd told me about himself. The way I found out was the worst part, he just told me. He forgot that he'd lied in the beginning, and he'd start randomly telling me things like, I almost married my high school sweetheart, but she changed her mind last second and my 10th or so girlfriend calls me every weekend to say she wants to fuck. This is after telling me that he's been with only 3 others before me, and that he doesn't talk to any exes. None of this would have mattered to me if he'd been upfront in the beginning, but because he lied and was using the whole I don't talk to girls, you can't talk to guys bullshit to keep me from having male friends, I was pretty upset. A few weeks after that, I told him I was going to the movies with a female friend for her birthday. I told him the movie was at 7 and I'd be back before midnight. We wouldn't be drinking, partying, anything like that. Well, at about 9:30 I start getting horrible texts. I'm a lying bitch, I better enjoy the D I'm getting because I'm never getting his again, and that he doesn't want to see me when I get home. I was crushed. It was the first time I'd seen any friend since we started dating, and she had never met him, but she saw what he was sending me. I ignored him and ended up getting home at 11 p.m. The house was trashed, and he was up waiting for me. When I asked what the hell he was talking about, he slammed the door in my face, literally, it hit me really hard in the nose, and screamed fuck off. I slept on the couch. The next day he left without saying a word to me for a softball game he'd been planning with his friends. I was still pissed, so I called him as soon as I woke up. BTW, he was out of state, and would be sleeping in a motel room with multiple single girls/guys for the next 5 days, and I told him he's an asshole, I'm done. He was absolutely desperate over the phone for me to give him another chance, but I hung up. I packed everything I owned and tried to leave, but he showed up right before I could and was very sincere about getting help. The next day, he stayed out until 5 a.m. at a strip club and came back without his promise ring on. He said he'd put it in his pocket so he wouldn't lose it, but he smelled strange and was acting strange and I just know that he cheated. He vehemently denied it, saying I was insane for accusing him and that we should just break up if I wasn't going to trust him. I said okay, and started packing again. Then he said he'd never said any of that. After the fight earlier, he said he'd go to therapy, stop punching holes in the walls, pay more attention to me and even let me go to clubs again and resume contact with my male friends. Well, he did start therapy. He went for 3 months, and nothing changed. He continued to punch and break things, scream at me, tell me everything was my fault and that he couldn't stand me. He turned to drinking, and when he'd get violent and drunk, he said I was the reason he was forced to drink. Because I was causing him so many issues. Well, things got better then they got worse. They were up and down for a while, but we had a good period of about 4 years. There were several large fights over the years. Here are a few that stand out. The day my favorite aunt died, I was with her at the hospital. I drove a shitty vehicle there that was known for breaking down. After she passed, I was a mess. I told him I was leaving and would be back soon. We lived only a few minutes down the street, but my car broke down and I was about 15 minutes late. I got home and he was furious, said I was cheating on him and that was why I was late, screamed that I was a cheater, and the landlord, who was our neighbor, heard the whole thing. He always hated me after that. No apology after he calmed down. Instead, it was my fault for causing him to worry. I was feeling depressed about the amount of porn he watched versus how often he was interested in me. We used to have a ton of sex. We had 6 different FFM threesomes with multiple girls he chooses, and I tried everything to satisfy his kinks. But then I just stopped being enough. Hint, he preferred porn and good old Jennifer Aniston. It's not very funny in this context, huh? Guys, I have zero self-esteem at this point, and I'm just dreading waking up every single morning. One day, after a month of no sex, he locks himself in the bathroom and I can hear him in there. I get so sick to my stomach and have an anxiety attack. I'm a very in shape, busty girl. I'm in gymnastics and have always been told I'm generally attractive, so it's not a weight issue or anything. I suspect porn addiction. I'm hyperventilating on the floor when he comes out, and he's sweet for a moment, asking what's wrong and to please talk to him. Well, I trusted him and I shouldn't have. I told him in the most calm voice I could that it makes me feel sad when he chooses porn over me, that we've had sex 4 times in 3 months and I wish I had more from him. He completely lost it. He grabbed my shoulders so hard his nails dug in, he shook me and screamed that he doesn't even watch porn, that he is so whipped by a stupid bitch, that his life is shit because of me. I have always been very sensitive and I cry at the drop of a hat. I know that makes him feel like I'm trying to manipulate him. But even if I lock myself in the bathroom to cry, in private, it's still my fault and I'm using it to control him. I don't have anywhere to go, and I cannot not cry sometimes. Is there something I could have done to show him I just need to cry sometimes? Most of the year was good, but the past few months he's been screaming a lot more. He's told me that I am a horrible person for trying to leave him years ago, and that I don't deserve him and will never find another guy who'd put up with me. He always denies things and tries to make me sound crazy, so this time I recorded it. Later, when he was more calm, I played it for him, and he accused me of inviting guys over to pretend to be him so I could get him in trouble. What the fucking fuck? He's done much more. He's gone through every file on my computer and set the only dirty one he could find as my background to humiliate me because he knew his family was coming over. He wanted them to see the filthy shit I look at. Remember earlier how I said he has a porn addiction? Yeah, he's at a level of hypocrisy that I just can't understand. I know this is incredibly toxic and I am so sick of feeling suicidal. I just wanted to know one thing. Am I the one who is abusive? I know I didn't give very many examples of things I've done, and maybe if he posted his side you'd agree with him, but what about my trying to leave? Was that a horrible act of betrayal? Because he is convinced it's worse than cheating, and says he is abused and is a victim. I am just so confused and feel constantly devastated and lonely. Update 1. To those of you saying I'm abusive for posting this, hell, I didn't mean it that way, but maybe? I didn't plan for or want him to see it, but I can see what you mean. Anyway, last night was probably the biggest night of my life, so bear with me if it starts getting too long. I've been in therapy for the last 3 years, and one of the things my therapist had me do was get a backpack ready with everything I might need in an emergency. Within 2 minutes of receiving his text yesterday and posting the edit, I grabbed that backpack and was planning on just walking, so at least I wasn't home. I don't have a car. I was thinking about just going through my contacts and talking to whoever I could, but that didn't work out. Josh was outside parked down the street. He was trying to catch me leaving. So when he sent the text that said "saw your post, I'm coming home," he was already home. He was fucking waiting. I just stood there cause I didn't know what to do. I thought he was going to be furious, but he ran up to me with a completely different react than I expected. He was crying, like bawling his eyes out. I still felt like I was waiting for him to get mad or scream at me or something, but he just hugged me really tight and said he's so sorry. He said he had no idea I felt that way and that he knows he has jealousy issues and a temper, and asked if we could talk about it inside. He begged me to come in and said he couldn't lose me and he loves me. I didn't know what to do. I just followed him in. He took my backpack from me, and when he looked at it he just broke down. He asked if I was really leaving him, why I didn't tell him things were this bad, why I never talked to him. I told him I can't talk to him. Every time I have ever decided to trust him and open up about even the tiniest thing that's bothered me, like him asking for other girls' numbers in front of me or him hanging up on me constantly, he always loses his shit and starts screaming at the top of his lungs while I just sit there as quiet as possible and apologize. And then this is where he changed. At this point he was no longer acting like he was sorry. He'd switch to "you're full of shit, I treat you like a goddamn angel," and get walked all over in return. He said he should never have to apologize to me. I was very upset, so I played one of the fights I recorded, and I'm so glad I kept those after he told me to delete them. Even in the first 3 minutes of it you can tell I was being calm, The first thing I say is baby, I didn't mean to say anything was wrong with us. I just wanted to know why you don't want me to apply at place I could use my degree. I just want to help make money. He immediately started yelling, accusing me of cheating and finding someone better. He told me to leave and find someone else there. He said he didn't care and believed I'd come back to him because no one else would tolerate me, and ended with a harsh insult. This fight happened recently, but he only listened to a few seconds before getting up and telling me to leave with that nonsense. He was definitely not apologetic and sweet anymore, so I was just quiet. He said he's done with this shit and I have no right to record him, and then he ripped the phone out of my hand. He said more stuff, but I can't remember everything. I asked what he was doing, but he just glared at me and then he stomped outside with it and then threw it as hard as he could. I don't know why, but that just broke my heart so much. He's broken things of mine before, but I had been planning on calling a friend, or my brother, and I didn't know any of their numbers. I asked him what he did with it, but he wouldn't answer. He slammed the door so hard when he came in that I flinched, then he bumped into me really roughly and went straight to his computer where he put his headphones on and turned up his music really loud. He always put his headphones on in a certain way when he's mad, cause then he can't hear me. He started playing a game and he was literally fuming. I stood in the door and he looked up at me, and the way he looked at me was awful. I could feel that he absolutely hated me, and what's sad is that wasn't even the first time he's looked at me that way. I think I was kind of in shock. I always feel that way when he's mad. He kept playing games, so I went out to look for my phone, which I found parts of shattered on the street, but I never found the battery and I don't think it was usable. When I went back in I was shaking. Frown, we talked it out later. I think everything is going to be okay. Just kidding. I don't know why, but I just felt so done. I grabbed his phone off the counter and ran outside. I knew he used to text my brother and he had the number of the friend I watched a movie with a while back, to make sure I was where I said I was, so I used his to call them. My brother answered on the second ring and I didn't know what to say, so I just started pouring my heart out. I told him I'm sorry we haven't talked in so long, but that I'm really scared and have nowhere to go. Guys, this hurt more than anything my boyfriend has ever said or done, and I'm still so surprised that he would have this reaction after so long. I can't remember the beginning, but the last thing he said was, "You deserve everything that's happening to you," and hung up. He hates me. He really thinks I deserve to stay with Josh because I'm attracted to girls. At the time I just thought fuck him, and I called my friend, who I'll call A. Well, she didn't answer at first, but then she called right back. Thank you all so much for suggesting that I call her because she was so happy to hear from me, and I told her everything that happened. She said she was 30 minutes away and she would come with her husband. I didn't even know she had gotten married. Frown. So I went back in and oh my god, that was a horrible 30 minutes. I didn't know what to do. I was so fucking worried he'd come out because I didn't want to see him. I'm a bad liar and he'd know something was up. I didn't want him to notice my stuff all packed up, so I just put all my cords/controllers/clothes and small things I couldn't live without in a box, but left the big stuff. I got there really fast and her husband, who is such a nice guy, helped me load my desk/chair and computer in their truck. This is the part I'm not feeling so great about right now. I left without saying a word to Josh. I could still hear him playing games in the other room, and the only thing I wanted in the entire world was for him to hug me and tell me it was okay, and, while my heart really hurts today, I can't even see through the tears to type this out. I know how he sounded, but I really loved him so much and it feels like I ripped my own limb off. When I think about his face and smile and everything that was good, I feel like there's a huge hole in my chest. But when I play these fights I recorded, and think about my future and this amazing friend who came and saved me and everything I can do with my life, I feel so happy. I thought I needed Josh, but man, it's so amazing feeling like I don't. I have to get a new phone, though. Update 2. I woke up on A's couch to the quietest house I've ever been in, and it felt so wrong I thought I died. It smelled like dryer sheets and something cinnamon, and there was a little dog blanket folded over the arm of the couch that her husband had put there because he said I kicked it off in my sleep. I kept waiting for a door to slam or music to start blaring or for my name to come out like a knife, and it didn't, and I just laid there staring at the ceiling with this pit in my stomach because the silence was making me shake. I made coffee and kept asking me if I wanted oatmeal, and I said yes even though I hate oatmeal. I just wanted to say yes to something simple. When I set my computer up on the table my hands were shaking so bad I kept missing the USB port, and then the dumbest thing in the world happened. My desktop loaded and he had changed the wallpaper to a screenshot of that file he set as my background that day, and I didn't even know I had breath left in me, but it just fell out. I unplugged it and just held me like I'd been dropped from a building. We wrapped the tower in a towel because seeing it was making me sick, and I kept apologizing because it felt like I was dripping poison all over their pretty kitchen. We went to get a cheap little phone after that. The guy at the store was like 16 and sweet and didn't ask why my hands were doing the thing they do. He just said I can set this up for you, and I could have hugged him. I couldn't remember any passwords. I couldn't remember my own birthday for a second. And then the second I got into my email it was like the screen was snowing. Security alerts, password resets, was this you? From sites I haven't even used in months, and attempts from his city, and then 5 minutes later from ours, and then a weird one from a VPN that I know he uses because he thinks he's a hacker. I changed what I could and I called my therapist from the parking lot. My voice sounded like I was talking through a paper bag, and she answered immediately. She never does that, and told me to come in at 3. I thought the time between the store and 3 would take a year, but it was like 5 minutes. In her office my legs were bouncing so hard the little fake fern on her table was rattling. I told her about the backpack and the phone and the recordings and how he was sitting 2 houses down last night and how every cell in my body thought he would be sweet and then flip and then be sweet again, and it was making me feel like gravity was changing in the room every 2 seconds. And while I was sitting there, A texted me a picture of our front door and a bouquet of grocery store roses on the mat, wrapped in that fake shiny cellophane that makes the worst rustling sound. He had written my name on an envelope in his handwriting I know better than mine, and I thought I was going to puke even though it was just paper. We didn't open the door. I called non-emergency and they told us to save everything and start a report, and I nodded even though I wasn't there. My therapist told me, very calm, that tomorrow we'd go get a protective order. She said my voice got higher when I kept saying it's not that bad sometimes. He has good days, and I wanted to argue, and then I didn't have the energy to lie for him anymore. We made a plan on a sticky note like I was in school again, and she hugged me at the end, which she never does. We went to the courthouse right when it opened, and it was like every sad fluorescent light I've ever seen, and women with kids on their hips and men staring at their shoes, and I had to write everything down on a form that looked like a test, and my hand cramped and A was rubbing my shoulder while I tried not to leave anything out and also not write too much because I knew if I started listing every time he said you'll never find better they'd have to bring me a second pen. The judge we saw for the temporary was an older woman with the softest voice, and I had this horrible childish urge to say I'm not making it up, and she just said I know and then stamped a thing, and suddenly I had a piece of paper that said I couldn't be contacted, that he couldn't come near me or where I was staying, and that I could do a civil standby to get the rest of my stuff. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I almost fell over. The officer who met us was young and kind and did not look at me like I was wasting his time. We drove to the house and the whole neighborhood looked exactly the same, like it hadn't noticed I'd ripped my life out of it. I saw our stupid lawn chair with the missing slat and the dent in the gutter where he threw a baseball once, and the porch light he insisted we leave on because he didn't want weirdos walking by, and I had to swallow 3 times before I could get out of the car. He answered the door in the hoodie I used to steal, sleeves pushed up, and for a second my body did that traitor thing where it remembered being held instead of everything else. The officer stood between us and he gave me that look like he was blessing me with patience. You can take your things, like it was kindness and not the law. He'd moved my boxes into the hall like he'd been expecting this scene, and he'd put one of our framed pictures face down on top of the pile so the glass wouldn't scratch it. And then I saw the frame was empty and the glass was spiderwebbed, and I realized it was the one of my mom and me, the only copy, and I don't know if he meant to do that or if my brain is just going to be stuck on giving him a reason for the rest of my life, but I had to put my hand on the wall to stay up. The cop told him to go wait in the kitchen, and he kept trying to linger and say things like you forgot your toothbrush and you don't have to be dramatic and you owe me for the internet, and the cop's voice went hard in that way men listen to, and he slunk away. I grabbed every dumb thing that made me me, my aunt's scarf, the stupid little clay cat my cousin made, my college sweatshirt he said was too baggy to be cute. I found my passport in the junk drawer where he hides things in plain sight, and I checked the shoebox in the closet where I keep letters, and it was very neat and the letters were all there, but when I picked the box up it felt heavier, and I swear to God my stomach knew before my eyes did. There was a tiny little white disc tucked under the cardboard lip, like a button. I didn't understand it at first, I just held it like an alien thing, and A looked at me and then at it and said, very quietly, that's a tracker. The officer looked like he wanted to put a hole through the wall. We put it in a plastic bag he had in the car, and I watched his pen move on the notepad while I tried to remember how to swallow. When we got back to A's, the new phone pinged with this soft little chime, and it said there was an unknown tracker moving with me, and it was like my blood went cold and hot at the same time even though we'd already found it. We called the officer and he added it to the report. I sent him a picture of what we found, and he told me to keep my phone on and call 911 if I saw him. A's husband took my computer apart that night because he does some IT stuff for work, and he said, very gently, I think something's been on here that shouldn't be, and then he showed me a little program running that I'd never seen with a name that looked like gibberish, and like an idiot I said maybe it's a driver? Even though I knew. He wiped it and I watched my old digital life dissolve, and I didn't even cry. It felt weirdly like relief to erase a house that was haunted. I mailed his ring back in a little padded envelope with tracking like it was radioactive. His mom called me twice from a number I didn't know because of course he gave her my new one, and I let it go to voicemail, and she said my name like she always did, very polite like she was hosting a party, and then said they'd be in touch about replacing certain items that were purchased by the family, and I stared at the phone and at A and tried to remember if I owned my own jeans or if those were bought by the family too. The second voicemail was just her sighing and hanging up, and for some reason that made me shake more than if she'd screamed. My brother texted me after 2 days of nothing, and the text was just, "Are you safe?" And I looked at it for a long time and then called him because I didn't want to do the dance. He answered on the first ring like he'd been sitting there with the phone open, and he apologized so fast I couldn't even catch any of it. All at once, something about how he'd been talking to Josh, that Josh had been sending him screenshots of my messages out of context and telling him I was blowing men for rides and that I was on pills and that I was threatening his life, and my brother said he believed him because he thought it was his job to believe the man in the room. And then he heard my voice on one of the recordings because Josh sent him that too to prove how crazy I am, and he said my voice sounded so small he had to pull over his car and he hated himself. He sounded like a little kid telling on himself, and I didn't know what to do with that. I cried and I told him he hurt me, and he cried and said he knows and asked if he could come get the rest of my stuff from the house because he wanted to stand there if Josh showed up, and I told him no, I have a piece of paper and a cop and a friend, and he said okay, in that way people do when they want to do something and they respect you enough to not do it. We said we'd get dinner at the diner near my old high school, like we were pressing a reset button on being siblings, and when he hugged me outside it felt like we were both trying to figure out where our arms went because we hadn't done it in so long. I applied to the job he never let me apply to. I did it on A's laptop with my hair in this dumb little bun because I didn't pack a brush, and with a cat I didn't know purring on my shins because their neighbor's cat comes over and gossips, and I was absolutely certain every sentence I wrote was garbage, and then I got an email back in an hour asking if I could come in tomorrow. I stared at it thinking it was a scam, and then I forwarded it to A and she just wrote back, and we went to Goodwill and got me a black skirt that doesn't ride up when I sit and a blouse that doesn't gape, and it felt ridiculous how excited I was to look like a person in a lobby. I thought I'd be sick in the parking lot, and then I sat in a chair for 20 minutes and talked about my degree and what I like, and they didn't ask me if I was planning on cheating on them, and I almost laughed because the bar for normal is underground. They called me later that afternoon and asked if I could start Monday part-time, and I cried in my therapist's voicemail like a weirdo because she said to tell her good things too, and I wanted to hand her something that wasn't blood. He showed up that night anyway. Not here, at the grocery store. I was in the cereal aisle debating between the one that tastes like cardboard and the one that tastes like childhood, and my fingers went numb because I could feel him like weather before I saw him. He rounded the end cap in that hoodie and I didn't even look at his face. I just turned and walked right out like I'd rehearsed it in some dream, the cereal still in my hand, and I put it down in the lobby like it was a baby I was dropping off somewhere safe. He said my name once behind me and it was a whisper and a scream at the same time, but he didn't touch me, and I got in A's car and I drove around the block and called 911, and my voice came out calm, and I gave them the case number and the order number and the street, and I parked under this tree that kept tapping at the windshield like it was telling me to keep going. The officer who showed up recognized my name, and that made me feel seen in a way I didn't want, and he took a statement, and I went home shaking, and A tucked me on the couch like a kid after a thunderstorm. He left me a voicemail later that I saved because they told me to. The first 30 seconds was him crying and saying he missed his best friend and that he'd fix it and that he was sober now, even though I could hear the slosh. And then he shifted into that flat voice and said, "You're making a mistake and no man is ever going to love you like I do, and I can still see you if I want," and then back to crying, like flipping a light. I'm sorry this is so long, everything feels like it takes 3 paragraphs right now. I keep thinking of the stupidest things. The way he used to tuck my hair behind my ear when I was trying to read and how I wanted to bite him for it. The way he'd make a pan of eggs at 2 a.m. just for us and call it a midnight scramble. The way he once drove an hour to pick up a bookshelf I found online and painted it the wrong color and was grumpy about it for weeks. And then the way my breath always changed when his key hit the lock because I never knew which version was coming in. I put on music while I cleaned a little corner of A's spare room that is mine now, and the song that came on was one he loved, and my body did that whole movie of us for a second, and then I pressed play on one of the recorded fights like I'm rewiring a circuit. It feels stupid and mean to do to myself, and also like the only thing keeping me from walking back to a house I don't live in. Court for the longer order is in 8 days. I have a folder now because A's husband said folders make people listen, and it's filled with my little life, screenshots and the receipt for the phone because he threw it, and you can see where the glass spidered, pictures of the stupid wall holes he said were from moving even though they were round like fists, the tracker in a bag with a little number on it, a printout of one of the fights. Reading your own words in a transcript is like watching your ghost, and that sticky note from my therapist with the plan in her handwriting. I don't know what will happen, but I know what will not happen, and I didn't know that before. I ate cereal on the couch last night at 1 a.m. because I could, and A came out half asleep and sat with me, and we whispered and laughed about nothing until we cried, and when I finally went to sleep I dreamed about nothing at all, no doors, no yelling, just black, and I woke up thinking I was late for something and then remembered I'm not late, I'm just here. I don't think I've ever liked a word as much as here.